Okay, I'm going to ask, and I need you to answer. I'm going to give you an opportunity. I need to know what your favorite things are. So first of all, on three, I'm going to need you to shout your favorite food. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Favorite candy on three. 1, 2, 3. I heard Skittles, and that's a great answer. Okay. Favorite movie on three. 1, 2, 3. I want you to know I heard 0 movies. It all sounded like mush. Do that again. 1, 2, 3. Dora the Explorer. the live action. Okay. Favorite book. 1, 2, 3. You know what I love so some of you said the Bible, and I hope that's the real answer and not because you don't read any other books. But okay. What if I were to ask you, like, what's your favorite legume? 1, 2, 3. Okay, you know what was interesting? Not many of you had a favorite bean, except for Livette. She's very passionate about lentils. If I were to ask what's your favorite shape of pasta? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, see, there's some things that, what is it? just the noodles. Now, here's the deal. There are some things that I could ask about that would get you really excited. Like if I said, what's your favorite video game? 1, 2, 3. Okay, some of you. And then some of you, so wait. I don't know if you saw this. Some of the room got really excited. Some of the room shrugged. Not a question that they care about. Each of us have things that can get us excited, that can get us interested, and these are the like random person conversations. And here's what I mean by that. Like if you were standing in the lunch line at school and you heard somebody talking about this, even if you didn't know this person, you would be so excited that you would have to jump into the conversation. You know those conversations? Like when you're just walking and you hear somebody talking about something and you go, ooh, I gotta do that. Or you watch a YouTube video and it's something that you're so excited about that you're like, oh, I have to comment on this, right? It's just whatever it is, there's these things that we can get really, really passionate about that we just have to say something. Something has to come out of our mouths. I get really excited about a lot of things. I do. I think I'm a pretty passionate person. I have a favorite mechanical pencil. And if somebody were to talk about mechanical pencils, I would immediately go, oh. The best mechanical pencil is the Unicoro Toga, made in Japan. It weighs 0.6 grams, and it's an incredible thing to write with. And I don't know anybody who's more passionate about mechanical pencils than me. But if you were to bring up mechanical pencils, I promise you I would talk about it. There are things that when people talk about, you might get excited. And what's interesting is Jesus also had things that he would get excited about, that he would talk about, that he would speak about, even if it was awkward. You know, there's times that I have like butt into strangers' conversations because the topic was so interesting, even though it was socially awkward. Like I'll be walking through a restaurant and I'll hear somebody say something about Lord of the Rings, and I'll be like, hey, I need to talk to you about Lord of the Rings as well. And Jesus is not afraid to be a little bit socially awkward about some things. In fact, there's some things that Jesus was willing to be verse, willing to be against, willing to stand up for, willing to talk about, willing to have a strong opinion on. And that's part of what we want to look at in this series that we're starting today. What are the things that Jesus got really passionate about, really excited about? And one of them might surprise you a little bit, and it's rules. Jesus got really excited and really passionate about God's rules. But here's the thing, is that Jesus always does something, I think, a little different than we expect him to. But before we go any further into this message, I want us to stop right now. We're going to have a few minutes to talk at our tables about a few questions. So let's do this. All right. Hey, let me get you back real quick. So here's the deal. Jesus was really passionate, really excited about rules, and so some people might take that one way or another. But the question I want to ask is, does a bigger rule make for better holiness? Or does a bigger rule mean you're following God better? And I think that's an important question that we want to think about. See, when Jesus was here 2,000 years ago, there were a couple rules that everybody kind of agreed to. So in Luke chapter 11, there's this time that Jesus is preaching. And the Bible says that as Jesus was speaking, so in the middle of Jesus's message, a guy said, "Jesus, you're awesome. I want to invite you over to my house for dinner." And Jesus agreed to go to his house. Now, this is pretty nice. This is a guy saying, "Hey, I'm going to feed you." And how many of you would be fine if somebody said, "Hey, I'm going to give you free food"? That's a good deal. But he doesn't just invite Jesus, he invites Jesus's friends. And he's like, "Hey, I want your followers to come." And so Jesus's followers are going to come. How many of you, if somebody offered you free food and all of your friends free food, you'd be on board? Okay, yeah, that's what I think. And so here's what happens. Jesus is speaking, and one of the Pharisees invited him over for a meal. Now, Pharisee might be a word that you don't know, because we don't really have people who call themselves Pharisees now. But a Pharisee then was somebody who was really serious about following God. And they were so serious about following God that they had made really, really, really big rules. They had a ton of rules. They took the Bible and they said, "Listen, the Bible's nice, but if we make even bigger rules, even stricter rules, even more specific rules, if we take the Bible, which is nice, if we give it even more rules, we can follow God better." And so one of the rules that they had was about washing hands. And here's what happens. It says, Jesus went in. Oh, go back to that last verse real quick. I'm going to finish that last sentence. It says, Jesus went in and took his place at the table. Now we'll look at verse 38. It says, his host was amazed to see that he sat down to eat without first performing the hand-washing ceremony required by Jewish custom. So here's the deal. Jesus goes in and he takes a seat at the table and he doesn't wash his hands. Now here's the deal. This might sound really strange because some of you are going, "Ooh, Jesus, gross." But here's the deal. This is before they knew what germs were. So they washed their hands, but they didn't even know that washing your hands was something that could make your hands like clean from germs. They didn't even use soap, okay? So the people that did wash their hands, they're still washing without soap. So it's still nasty, okay? The reason they're washing their hands is not to have clean hands physically. They made a rule that the Bible didn't require that if you were really a follower of God, you would wash your hands before you ate as a sign or a symbol that even your hands were holy. So the idea was you were going to do a hand washing where you'd pour water over your hands. They aren't actually clean because you still have germs and you didn't use soap and all of those things. But symbolically, you were like, I want my hands clean for God. And that's what they would do. And here's the deal. If you didn't wash your hands, they would go, oh, not really a follower of God, I guess. I guess they don't really love God. They didn't wash their hands. Do you see that? They don't really wash their hands at all. They don't follow God. And so here's what happens. Jesus comes in and he doesn't wash his hands. Now, Jesus, I think, is probably somebody who is very serious about following God. Would you agree? He is God. Okay, so he's very serious about God. Jesus is very serious about God because he was God. And yet, he ignores this rule that was added on top of the Bible. This rule that was extra to the Bible. This rule where these guys were trying to be very strict. Not only were they strict about washing their hands, but they tried to take it a step further. Watch this. This is really fun. Not only did they say you have to wash your hands, but then they got worried. They were like, oh no. How are we going to wash our hands without getting our hands dirty in the process? Because here's the deal, they don't have running water, so they have to fill a cup up. But they're like, as soon as we fill the cup up with water and we pour the water over our hands, if we touch the cup and our hands were dirty, and then the water inside the cup makes our hands more dirty, and so how do we do this? So then they said, here's what you must do. You must wash your hands and then put water inside the cup, and then because your hands are clean, you can touch the cup and pour more water over your hands to be clean again. Isn't that crazy? And if you didn't do that, they said, you're not really following God. Now, do you know what's really amazing is that they did not care if the inside of the cup was clean. You know, it's really funny. This cup was left here on Wednesday night. Can you see it? Can you see it? It's got like somebody's protein shake caked inside of it. Now, if I were to take this into the bathroom right now and scrub the outside of it really good and wash the outside of it and then put some water inside, how many of you would drink it? I really expected, there we go. All right. I knew a middle school boy would. Okay. Yeah. So here's the deal. Most of you are like, no, that's filthy. This has been cooking for like 4 days. You know, whatever is left in here now has all kinds of bacteria. But here's what happens. Jesus broke the man-made rule. And this was something that he was passionate about, because they were starting to judge him. And then the Lord, which is Jesus, said to the Pharisee, you Pharisees are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are filthy, full of greed and wickedness. Whoa. Jesus was invited to a guy's house, but the rule, the man-made rule, the made-up rule, the rule that was added to the top of the Bible was a topic that Jesus was so passionate about that he was willing to stand up and say, you are wicked. That's a big deal. Why was it that Jesus was so upset about man-made rules? Number one, when we add rules on top of God, when we add rules on top of the Bible, when we make up our own rules and try to apply them to other people, but those rules are outside of the Bible, it's like we're cleaning the outside of the cup, but we're leaving the inside of the cup dirty. Here's what happens. When we add rules to the Bible, it may change what you look like on the outside, but it's actually not helping you on the inside. See, God's rules change us on the inside. When we make up rules and put them on after the Bible, we only change what's on the outside. Does that make sense? And if your inside's not changing, then it doesn't really matter how clean it is on the outside, because the cup is still dirty. So Jesus was very passionate. Hey, we don't want to make up our own rules, because it's actually not doing the thing that rules are supposed to do, which is change our hearts. Jesus is also really passionate about rules. Let me read a few verses after this in Luke 11:46. He says again to them, "Yes," said Jesus, "what sorrow awaits you, experts in religious law, for you crush people with unbearable religious demands, and you never lift a finger to ease the burden." What happens when we add rules that are not God's rules, when we add rules above and beyond, what we do is we make following God harder for people. And sometimes it's so hard that it can be crushing. Don't do this. Don't do this. But if you were to ever, go on YouTube and look at people weightlifting whose bones snap while they weightlift. Some of you have seen it. It's gross. But here's the deal. What happens sometimes is we could create rules that are so heavy that it crushes people underneath. And the reason that Jesus is like, hey, no, I'm really mad about made-up rules, is because he knows that when we make up rules and add them on top of the Bible, it makes some people go, oh, I can't follow Jesus. That's way too hard. I can't follow God. I guess I'm a failure. And they quit. I think another reason, and this will be my last point, another reason that Jesus is so passionate against us adding rules on top of God's rules is because it says that we know better than God. See, what happens is when we make up our own rules and put them on top, it puts us in God's seat. It puts us in God's throne. Puts us in God's position, in his place, and we get to go, you don't follow my rules. And God goes, no. You're not God. Your rules can't give people life. Your rules can't give people the promises of God. Your rules can't save anybody. Your rules can't do anything. They just maybe make you feel better. So Jesus is very passionate. In fact, there are 2 verses in the Bible that both warn, do not add anything to what God has said. They're very stern, strict warnings. You ever see like a train tracks? When you're about to drive over train tracks, there's warnings everywhere. Every like navigation app, like Google Maps or Apple Maps or Waze or whatever your parents use to get you places, every single one of them, when you're approaching a railroad, will go, railroad crossing ahead. When you get to the railroad, there's signs all over the place like, do not stop on the tracks. My grandfather worked on the railroad his entire life, and he taught my grandma to be very, very careful around train tracks. And so every time we're driving, anytime I'm driving with my grandma and she gets close to the train tracks, she stops way before the train. She looks to make sure no trains are coming, right? She is very cautious. Can I tell us something? If the Bible is like warning, do not add rules to God's rules, I think we should be just as careful to say, let's be wise here. God's rules are for our good. Jesus is very passionate about those. We'll talk about them. But when we make up stuff and then judge people for them on top of it, that's so, so dangerous.